Hi, my name is Tara Earth Murphy, and I'm with Touch of Earth Body and Energy Work. This is your 3-credit CE course for massage therapists in the category of ethics. This particular course is themed around the topic of meeting the client where they're at. At the same time, we're going to go through some different boundaries, techniques, and tools for practitioners to utilize for their own safety during their practice. This class is segmented into 3 different videos, and each video, after the videos, you're going to take a 15 question questionnaire, and after you take that questionnaire, then you'll receive your certification. So it should total all up into about 3 hours. The first part of the course is going to be about problems that arise in a massage practice and how to ethically respond to that. The second video is going to be about boundaries, and we're going to go over the whole scope of what boundaries are and what they look like in our massage practice. And then in the third video, we're going to discuss some things that you can use to respond to the problems that we talked about in the first video, as well as some other helpful tips and advice for us to be able to use into our own lives and our personal lives, which will then translate into our massage practice. So, on forward, here we go. So, we have to take ethics classes every 2 years to renew our license, our certification. What is ethics? What does that mean? So ethics are morals that are agreed upon in a group. Pretty self-explanatory. General principles that we all follow, certain guidelines that either govern a person's behavior or a certain conducting of an activity. So there is a short 10-minute video I actually want you to watch, the TED Talks about ethics, just to go over the broad category of what we're going to be talking about here.
Just consider for a moment. You feel pressure regarding your class grade and have an opportunity to turn in work that is not your own to get ahead. You can tell a friend an important truth, but which also might end the friendship. You recognize that the continuing use of fossil fuels in cars and planes contributes to climate change, and yet you want to get where you need to go. You wonder about the implications of placing your child in a new charter school with higher testing scores, as opposed to supporting your own neighborhood school. Or you see an interaction at a party between a man and a woman that seems off, and you wonder whether you should intervene. We face challenges in life, large and small, that if we listen closely, ask ethical questions of us. What are my principles? What are my values? What do I stand for? These questions ask us to consider our obligations to ourselves and to others. They require decisions and actions. And in turn, these decisions and actions form a part of who we are, or our character, as ethical persons. But how well equipped are we to respond to these challenges? On what basis do we tell a friend a painful truth as opposed to engaging in deceit, or decide to intervene to help someone in need? More generally, how do we know what it means to live a good life? As a philosopher, ethicist, and educator, I'm interested in how we recognize these questions, but also how we learn to respond to them well. So you're probably familiar with what an educator is, right? One who teaches, and perhaps you've met a philosopher before too, although we're exotic species of some kind, right? But the ones who ask big questions. But you might be wondering, what is an ethicist? Well, there's many kinds of us. Right? So there are business ethicists who consider the place of ethics in the workplace and corporate and financial sectors. There are research ethicists who discuss the importance of integrity in research practices and consider the broader implications of the research we produce. And there are bioethicists who consider the ethical implications of biomedical research, stem cell research, for example, or human impacts on the environment, just through GMOs. But at his or her core, the ethicist is one who cares and thinks deeply about matters of right and wrong, and about how we can choose ethically better as opposed to ethically problematic courses of action in life. So, when I refer to the ethicist, I'm not referring to some magical person or saint who always knows and does and can tell others the good, nor am I referring to an exclusive class of people licensed by a university, hospital, or business to practice ethics. Rather, the ethicist, or the everyday ethicist, as I refer to it, can be found in our homes, in our streets, and in our schools. The everyday ethicist can be a friend, family member, acquaintance, or stranger. The everyday ethicist is all of us insofar as we recognize, encounter, and respond to the ethical issues that arise in our own lives. Now, one doesn't need a doctorate in moral philosophy to recognize this. Right? Many of you will probably already have considered the everydayness of ethics in your own life. And I'm consulted with by undergraduate students on a regular basis regarding ethical issues that they face in their life. Just some recent examples. I had a discussion with a student about conflict that she was experiencing about respecting the wishes of her parents and choosing her own course of study here at Penn State. Another student who was conflicted about loyalty to his partner and the desire to end a long-term relationship. And another student who's concerned about Penn State's investment in fossil fuels and how to push Penn State towards investment in cleaner energy. But my point is not just that ethical issues are prevalent in our lives. Many of us will probably have already thought about that. But that, to take it a step further, it's possible to develop better or worse answers to these challenges and questions, right? We can act unethically, so in ways that perhaps we regret and hopefully we learn from. And we can act ethically and in ways that promote the good. And although there's no single answer to deciding between those two options, one way to respond is to cultivate our own ethical awareness and to develop the skills needed to act ethically. Now, ideally, school, which is one of the most significant socializing experiences we have, would play a useful role in helping us to respond to ethical challenges, right? We go to school, at least in part, to prepare us for adulthood, to give us a variety of skills, academic, social, personal, that allow us to understand our world and ourselves. To this end, we get training in a variety of academic subjects and an informal curriculum of extracurricular activities, clubs, sports, and so on. But what we generally don't receive is training in ethics education. Nor in an era of maxed out curricula and standardized testing do we really even leave open space for frank and honest discussion about the ethical issues that we face in life. Now, this lack of attention to ethics has serious implications. Now, in the book Lost in Transition, The Dark Side of Emerging Adulthood, Christian Smith, who's a sociologist from the University of Notre Dame, discusses the results of thousands of survey interviews and hundreds of in-person interviews that he conducted with emerging adults, ages 13 to 23, regarding their understanding of ethics. And two things became clear from these interviews. One, that children and adolescents often do raise ethical questions in class, right, about the issues they face in the hallway, their own lives, the curriculum they're being taught. But these questions are often sidestepped and avoided in the classroom by teachers and administrators in order to try and avoid controversy. Thus, Smith notes that the moral pedagogy of most middle and high schools, or many middle and high schools, seems to be avoid, ignore, and pretend the issues will go away. But the flip side of this avoidance is the failure to engage in useful ethics education opportunities, right? To educate and have teachers and children realize that it's possible to both critically and respectfully engage in dialogue about ethical issues, and that just as we develop skills in other areas in school, we can develop skills, say reasoning and empathic skills, that can help us to develop as ethical persons. And second, and related to the first, it became clear that many of the interviewees didn't possess the tools to adequately address the ethical issues that they were facing in their life. So in discussion of issues ranging from cheating on a test to obligations to help others in need, over 60% of the interviewees discuss ethics and what's right and wrong as entirely up to each individual. Now, personal beliefs, opinions, and intuitions are vitally important in motivating us to act ethically in the world and in developing our own ethical understanding. But to think of all ethics and all matters of right and wrong as completely up to each individual can be challenging when it comes to taking an ethical stand as a community, right, not just as individuals, against things that actually are ethically wrong. So here I'm thinking about assessing and taking an ethical stand against sexual assault, against terrorism, against institutional racism, and so on. So what I'm arguing here is not that personal opinions and beliefs aren't important, because they're vitally important, and it's important to respect those differences. But it's also important to think about and think deeply about certain ethical foundations, those based in basic human rights, right, or caring and compassion for others, for example, that allow us to make basic assessments of right and wrong and allow us to make moral judgments. And this sense of judgment, and there's multiple senses of the term, is not based in self-righteous castigation of another person or community. It's based in a desire to understand, discuss, and evaluate ethical beliefs, and do the sometimes hard work required to make good ethical decisions. But this distinction can be lost without any attention to ethics education. So what I'm advocating for here is not a universal set of ethical beliefs for all people, nor a map that solves all of our ethical problems, because no such map exists. What I am arguing is that it would be important for us to educate our children and adolescents to respect the many ethical beliefs and values there are in the world, to be properly humble about their place in a broader community, but also to be willing to recognize and stand up for their own ethical convictions. So what I also want to note here is that if we're worried about the controversy of introducing ethics into schools, we'll do well to recognize that children, too, are everyday ethicists. That is, when we're talking ethics with kids, we're not introducing something wholly new, right? If we're doing our work well, we're recognizing the ethical concerns that children already have, and we're building from those concerns to help them develop as ethical people. So in a project that I run called Philosophical Ethics in Early Childhood, or the PEACH Project, we're very happy about how the acronym turned out, right? We spend a lot of time talking ethics with 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And we use children's literature, artwork, and games to motivate those discussions. And what I find in that work, and my colleagues find as well, is that from a young age, children possess ethical convictions and ethical ideas. They have ideas about fairness, about inclusion and exclusion, about what's right and wrong, right? So to give you an example, in a recent discussion I had with a young girl, age 4, in the class I was working with, I asked her about why she would or would not include a new child into her play group, right? It was a hypothetical girl named Christina. And she said she would include this girl in a play group because she knew it would make her feel good. And so it was the right thing for her to do. And she went on to draw a picture of what this would look like for her, right? And not only is it just a beautiful picture, so it's just worth it for that reason, it's also clear that she's here expressing this sense of community that she's trying to build and why she thinks it's important to include this girl into her friend group, right? So what became clear to me from this discussion and many others is that children possess a sharp ethical awareness. Right? This is evident historically, for example, in children of the civil rights movement who participated in school desegregation in tremendously brave ways and in many ways that adults failed to do. But it's also evident in our more common daily conversations with kids when we use children's literature, such as Frog and Toad and The Giving Tree, and children raise questions and insights about issues of fairness, honesty, loyalty, respect, and many other ethical values. Right? And one of children's greatest strengths in these conversations that adults often lack, actually, is the ability to be imaginatively present, to care about the story in a way in which they almost talk with the characters, and to care about the outcome in a vital way. And in this sense, ethics doesn't need to be a mere exercise or a separate discipline for children. It can be an outgrowth of their imagination and their daily present concerns. Right? So what I am advocating for here today is that we think about the presence of ethical concerns in our life and the possibility of ethics education as being a positive and helping us to address and think more deeply about those concerns. And hopefully, redouble our efforts to build an ethical community both within and beyond our schools. Thanks very much.
Okay, so now we're going to go over some definitions that are going to come up quite often during this course. So the first one is respect. What is respect? To respect someone is to have deep admiration for someone or something based on their behaviors or their qualities or their achievements. So we usually respect someone who does something of good stature, respecting somebody who is a philanthropist, respecting somebody for being respectful. So respect is a word that will come up quite often because in ethics it's one of the more prominent words. You have to respect your clients as well as yourself. Intuition is a great word that therapists like to use during their sessions or their practice. Intuition is that inner knowing of something without cautious reasoning. So knowing that there is a issue around the knee, you just feel intuitively drawn to go to the knee, or you intuitively know that when someone hugs you that they're really what they're really feeling, if they're really feeling like giving you a hug, or if there's something wrong, or if they're really elated. You could tell by your intuition, by embracing someone. Also, intuitively knowing if something's not right. So you have a client who comes into your room and you just feel a little off, like something is inappropriate or is going to happen that may be appropriate, or just intuitively knowing that that person's intentions are not good. So intention is that inner knowing, that inner guidance that we have to navigate as our compass in this world. Another definition I have for you here is concentration. Concentrate, it's the action or power of bringing one's intention or mental effort to one focal point, to one thing. So not having any other distractions, just concentrating on one thing. So that's very important for us therapists to continue to practice, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. Now I have some great quotes that I found on the internet of some individuals of ethical quotes. So the first one is by this man right here. This is Albert Camus, and he says, "A man without ethics is a wild beast loosened upon the world." So that's a very good ethical quote there for you. I have 3 Albert quotes for you, actually. This one, we obviously all know, Albert Einstein. He says, "Try not to become a man of success, but rather a man of value." Very powerful statement from this very intelligent man. And this one is Albert Schweitzer. He says, "Ethics is nothing else than reverence for life." Which is true. Reverence, respect, just respecting people and things. That's an ethical practice. So those are 3 great quotes that I found that I thought really embraced today's topic. Now we're going to discuss the problems that arise during a massage practice. And as we know, there are quite a few things that we encounter. And as a reminder, the theme for this particular course is meeting the client where they're at. But at the same time, we are going to discuss things that will keep us practitioners safe as well by strengthening our boundaries and keeping our structure really secure, which will also help our client feel safe and secure in return. One problem that arises during a massage practice is that the client isn't heard. The client didn't receive the needs that they wanted. And there are a lot of reasons that this can happen. So say that Amber May comes to get a massage from you and she wants a deep tissue, and you already gave 4 deep tissues prior to her arrival, and you're feeling pretty drained. You might not want to provide a deep tissue massage for Amber. And so the client is coming to you with what she knows she needs, and if you are not able to meet those needs, you have every right to refuse that session. We want to make sure that our clients are receiving the work that they actually want and need, and we need to make sure that we can provide that service. And if we can't, we can go ahead and refer her to someone else. So don't feel bad if you're not able to just give everything to your client. You need to make sure that you're also checking in with your boundaries while respecting them where they're at. So this is a very important thing to remember, because a lot of massage therapists just continue to plow through the sessions because they feel that they have to, or they want more money, or whatever the reason may be. But it's really not an ethical choice to just go ahead and give somebody a session if you are not feeling up to it. Same goes if somebody wants, say, a Thai massage that's very strenuous on the body, and if you are not feeling up to it for whatever reason, perhaps there's things going on in your life that are preventing you from being 110%, because we are human, these things come up. So make sure to check in with yourself. If you are not able to do that, don't do that. We need to make sure that the client's needs are actually met. Another example of this would be, say that Amber actually comes to you and she has fibromyalgia, and she tells you that she's very sensitive, but she wants the detox, but she's very sensitive. And let's say that you heard the word detox, and you know that, say, cupping is a great tool to help detox the system, and you are trained in cups, and you give Amber a massage and she receives all these cups, and then she the next day has this adverse reaction and does not feel good and is not happy with the session. And this is because we didn't actually hear completely what Amber had said. She had said she's very sensitive and has fibromyalgia. She wants the detox, but cupping is can be very aggravating for somebody's system or their tissues if they are sensitive. So perhaps maybe it would have made more sense to give her a myofascial session or a lymphatic drainage. So make sure you really hear what your client needs and don't just provide any tools in your toolbox for just anyone, because every body is different. So we want to make sure that we actually hear our client. An example that I have, a story, is that I was fresh into my practice, maybe about 1 or 2 years, say, and I had a bicyclist come to see me, and he told me that he really had some neck pain from being on the bike. And so, levator scapula, some scalenes, he really needed some specifically posterior work. So I give him a massage. I start him prone. I work on his back, I work on the glutes, I work on the legs and the feet, and then I have him flip over, and then I work my way back up. And by the time I got to the neck, it was about 5-10 minutes left in the session. And I was so used to doing a routine at that point because I was new. I was just doing my routine. And that's not what he came for. He didn't come for a relaxing 60-minute. He really just came for some specific work on his whole neck region. And I didn't hear him. I did what I wanted to do, what I was comfortable with, and I didn't serve my client. And I definitely didn't meet him where he was at. And I don't blame him. He never returned to me. And so it could have been a great massage, but again, that's not necessarily why someone's coming to see you. They might have something specific that they need for you to address. So make sure you really hear your client. It's only ethical to just be in that space with them, of hearing them, receiving the information they need, and then be able to serve them in that way, because it is their session, not your session. It's not about you. So make sure that you are giving them exactly what they specifically need, and really observe that during their intake and by their body mechanics and any other nonverbal communication that you pick up. See how you really need to address their body. And also, we also want to make sure that we really communicate with them in general. So Amber comes to you for her intake, and she tells you that she has fibromyalgia and that she's very sensitive. Well, you're also going to want to ask other questions, like, are you sensitive to smells? Are you okay with essential oils? You might use essential oils in your practice, but if your client's not a fan of them, you're definitely not going to want to use them. You're also going to want to ask things about other allergies. Are you allergic to the lubricant that I use during the session? So make sure that you check in with that. Also, there might be certain areas of the body that the client does not want work, such as the abdominal region. That can be very vulnerable for some people. They don't like getting their abdominal work. They don't like getting abdominal work. So make sure that you ask these questions so that you don't just start draping them in that area. It could be very jarring for them if they're not expecting it. Some people don't like the feet worked on, so don't work on the feet. Also, check in with pressure. So when you're working on Amber during the session, ask her about 5-10 minutes into the session, Amber, how is the pressure? Would you like me to use more or less? Is this feeling good to you so far? Also check in with the temperature. Is she okay with the table warmer on? Is it too hot or cold in the room? Should you turn on a heater? Should you turn on a fan? Check in about 5-10 minutes to make sure that she's completely comfortable before she completely slides into deep relaxation. Also, when you flip Amber over, make sure to check in with her then. That's a great time that the session's being interrupted, so check in to make sure if there's anything else that's calling out to her, if anything's coming up for her. And again, check in with temperature. Just overall, make sure that she knows that whatever she needs, you are going to meet those needs. Also, if a client, if Amber's on the table and she makes any kind of noises, just anything in pain, or if their face is scrunched up, or if you notice that there's shallow breathing, or if there's something, any other indications with their nonverbal communication that's telling you that there's something not right. So always check in there. Also, say you're working on the psoas and that you're working on new techniques that you just learned in a class. This is also a great time to check in with your client, especially if you're new and fresh in a certain technique or area, or even if you're not in certain areas, the iliacus or even the inner adductors. These are very sensitive areas, as well as the glutes. These are great areas to make sure you check in, because that client could be very uncomfortable, and sometimes clients don't actually tell you when they're uncomfortable. They wait for the invitation. So make sure that you understand that too, because they're not always going to tell you what they need. You're going to have to invite that conversation, and then they'll be able to feel that they can open up and tell you that doesn't feel good. Always check in with their client. Always communicate their needs during the intake and during the session. This is also an opportunity to build trust with them, that they know that you're not ignoring them, that you're completely present. So incorporating questions occasionally during the session will be helpful. You don't want to ask too many questions, because you don't want them to feel interrupted during their state of deep relaxation. They're coming for comfort, so check in sparingly, but don't overdo it. Only check in when you notice that you need to. So now you have Amber on your table, and you've communicated 5-10 minutes in, checked in with pressure, checked in with the temperature. She's doing fine. And then you just go ahead and you're giving her a massage. And then all of a sudden, you start drifting off on a beach in Hawaii. Why is this a problem? Why is zoning out a problem? Lack of concentration is a common problem that practitioners encounter, because if we're not concentrating on our client and we're concentrating on something else, we're not meeting our client where they're at. We're not being attentive. Amber has come in for a 16-minute session with you, and she's paying you for your time and for your help. And if your attention is elsewhere, you're not serving her. And of course, don't beat yourself up if you occasionally zone out and think of something else, because we are human and this does happen. But we need to practice coming back to our focal point and concentrating on what our work is that we're doing. The more we zone out and don't concentrate, we actually become masters of multitasking. So by massaging Amber and thinking of other things like what you're going to do for dinner or how you're going to respond to that argument you had earlier that day, this form of multitasking is not really serving anyone. It's not serving you, and it's not serving your client. The more that you practice coming back to the one thing you're focusing on, all your energy is being put into one thing rather than scattered out in different departments, the more you're able to enhance that practice and enhance that work, that focal point that you're concentrating on. The less distractions, the better. The more present you are, the more you're going to understand the map of their body. So again, say that Amber's on your table and you're working on a knot in her rhomboid, on her left rhomboid. And then you notice that because you're paying attention, that the left posterior quadratus lumborum muscle is super tight, and it's pulling the rector spinae, and it's causing this twist, which is probably the culprit for the knot in the posterior left rhomboid region. You wouldn't be able to put the dots together and make the connection if you were still off in Hawaii. So know that the more you're concentrating, you're learning more, you're enhancing your practice, you're being able to do your work more fully and comprehend more information that is right in front of you because you're really paying attention and present. Also, Amber can feel it if you're not paying attention. Even if she doesn't consciously know, she subconsciously can feel that you're not with her. Because when you're touching someone, or if you're doing energy work and with their field, the client and the practitioner are melding energies. And of course, you want to make sure that you're not jumping into their field, but you're melding with their field and you're working with them. And because you're doing this, the energy is being exchanged between the both of you, and that information is being shared. So if you're not present, her body can feel that, and her body won't be able to really sink into the parasympathetic nervous system as smoothly as she could if you were not present with her. The more you're aiming for that intention of her relaxation and assisting her, the more that she's going to be able to drop into that space. And that's why clients come to us. They come to us to have a sacred space for them to be able to relax, to have pain relief, and to just receive help. So make sure that you understand that lack of concentration and zoning out is a problem in massage therapy. And we're going to talk more about this in part 3 with some techniques on how to help guide you into strengthening that practice a little bit more with concentration. The session is over and you have left the room and Amber is changing. And now you go in for the outtake. And you explain everything that you noticed during the session, where she holds tension, where she could use some help to unravel some of that tightness in her shoulders, and you want to be able to give her more advice to take home. So what is appropriate and what is not? In our line of work, we want to stay in our scope of practice. We don't want to give inappropriate advice. So don't go tell Amber to go take different supplements or to do deep stretches or anything that is not appropriate, because even if the client wrote their medications down for you in that intake form, you might not be well versed on what works with what, and even if you did, it's not in your line of practice. So make sure that you don't prescribe anything. Don't tell them to take anything. Don't tell them to do a deep stretch, especially if they're not flexible, because if they go home and do it, they might get hurt and then come back at you and blame you for that. So you want to make sure that you're keeping yourself safe, but also them. Meet them where they're at by making sure that you give appropriate advice. And so I would say maybe a gentle stretch would be helpful. Remind them to drink a lot of water. Remind them that Epsom salt baths are helpful. You know, little basics, things are okay to assist them with, but it's not okay to tell them to give them a whole regimen, homework of doing all these certain stretches or take all these different supplements or medications or whatever. You know, be careful and make sure that you don't give inappropriate advice. My story is that I am a very big fan of magnesium. I feel that magnesium topically or internally is very helpful for the body. And so I a lot of times tell my clients about my experience with it. I never tell them to go and get magnesium, to go take it internally. I tell them my experience and how it helps me, but I don't tell them how that they should do it. However, a lot of clients have heard that it has helped me and they have taken magnesium themselves topically, and I actually noticed their muscles have loosened up quite a bit. So it's my experience that I've shared with them, and they can do the research themselves and see if they benefit from it. However, you definitely still want to be very careful to make sure that when you're sharing your story or your experience, that they are interpreting it as your story and not trying to impose that information that they should go do that. I did have one woman one time call the studio and talk to the receptionist because I was in session, and she asked her to ask me what magnesium I told her to get. And that definitely did not happen. However, she interpreted that information that I had. And so that really jolted me, because I didn't tell her to do that. And even if she thought that I did, that still could be tricky territory and could come back on me, and I could get in trouble even though I never told her that. So you really want to be careful of what information you share. You don't want them to go run and do something that's going to harm them, and you definitely don't want it to come back on you. So make sure you stay in your scope of practice and that you are very careful with your delivery. I definitely don't want anything to happen to you for making a mistake like that. And so Amber's so pleased with her session. She is now going home and she is telling all of her friends. And all of her friends are so excited about how she had such a great session with you. And now all your friends are coming to you, which is great. This is what we love. We love referrals. However, a lot of these people are now having these really high expectations of you. This is another problem that can occur in our practice. If somebody comes to us with high expectations, we of course want to meet them where they're at. We want them to have a great session. We want them to have a great experience. However, we have to remember that every body is different, and every body matches with a different person differently. The chemistry is different. So even if Amber had a great session with you, it doesn't mean her other friends are going to have a great session with you. Doesn't mean they're not, but you want to stay in neutrality and also check in with your ego, because if you have 5 friends coming to you, it might inflate your ego like that. Oh, I can do this. But you have to continue for each person that comes into your session, even if they have come to you before. Each person that comes into your session, it's a new experience, it's a changed body, because we're always changing and morphing and transforming. It's always going to be different and new. So even a client who's come to see you quite a bit, they might have a session that was totally awesome and then another one that was so-so. And that's based on your chemistry of where you're at and where they're at. And you want to make sure that you're aware of that, because it's not always going to be the best for them. It's just not. It's make sure that you understand that their experience is going to be based on where they're at that day. So stay in neutrality, do the work that you do, and if they don't have their expectations met, don't take it personal. It's not personal. Again, it could be for whatever reason. Their bar might have been way unrealistically high, or whatever factors it could have been. Stay in neutrality. Know that you're doing the best that you can that day, and don't take it personal if you do not meet their expectations just because you met someone else's. And especially, even if it's a new person that has come to see you, or if it's a referred person, that's even higher expectations because they've heard of your work. Whatever the circumstances are, just remember that when someone has those expectations, to tell them that you are, first of all, you're not going to fix their problems. That's one expectation that clients have. It isn't just that you're going to have a great session, but that you're going to fix their problems. So you want to communicate that that's not your job. Your job is to help the client. Your job is to help them with their problems, but not fix them. The only person that can fix their problem is them themselves. They can receive help from lots of different people, but ultimately their body is the one that's going to open up and receive that transformation. We cannot force that to happen for them. It is their path, their choice, and they need to do that work themselves. And we get to empower them in that work. So again, if someone comes to you expecting something from you, remind them of how this works, that you are in this role as a healthcare professional to assist them with their path, and that they too get to work with their breath and relax, and they also get to work with their healing, and that the both of you can work together on their growth. It's not just you that's going to be a savior. It's a collaboration. So these expectations that clients have can really be difficult for them as well as you if you feel that you have to meet those expectations. So that's a common problem, and make sure that you're aware of that. Now you're out in public and you're at the grocery store and you see Amber. She's over there by the produce. What do? I'm sure that may have happened to you, that you see somebody you know out in public. You don't go talk to Amber, is what you do. It's not appropriate. If Amber sees you and she wants to come say hi to you, by all means, have a conversation with her. But it is not appropriate for you to go and talk to her. You need to respect her boundaries. She might not want to talk to you. She might look at you as, say, a client would for a talk therapist or a doctor, looking at you as a medical professional, and that's a part of your life that she just wants to keep over there and doesn't want to integrate in her personal life. You have to respect that, and again, not take that personal, because it's not personal. Everyone has their own story. They have their own things going on. So make sure when a client is out in public, wherever you see them, you don't have to be rude, but you don't have to run away from them, but don't engage with them unless if they give you that invitation first. And that's another way how you can meet the client where they're at, by respecting their space and boundaries in public. The last thing we're going to mention here about problems that arise during a massage session are actually with the practitioner in regards to self-care. So we need to practice what we preach. If we're going to tell a client to consider getting a massage once a month, we should probably take that advice as well. We want to take care of our bodies. So some ways that we can do this are our exercise or diet, getting massage or other modalities. There's lots of different ways, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this in part 3. But the reason that we want to take care of ourselves is because we want to make sure that we have the reserves and that we have the energy to be able to give to our clients. You can't help someone if your cup isn't full. It's not practical. And if you're not working on yourself, you're not really understanding of how you can really help somebody else. And another reason that we want to do self-care is that the better we feel, the better our client will feel. And the more that we get massage, the more that we're going to understand the body and be able to apply this awareness to our client more profoundly. So don't take this one lightly. A lot of practitioners who don't take care of themselves are not performing to their utmost potential, which isn't really meeting the client what they need. They need really great work, and if we're only doing 50% because we're not doing our work, then we're limiting our client as well. So please just make sure to take care of yourself. This is so important, to feel good, to be good, and that way we have more knowledge and awareness so that we can really help Amber. So that pretty much wraps up part 1 of problems that arise during a massage session. Little overview here is to remember to make sure that you hear what your client's needs are. Really make sure you're hearing them and that you're receptive to that and that you're applying that so that they know that they've been heard. My number 1 advice for students is the best way to meet a client's needs is to make sure to touch that body part first. So even if your client, if you see that there's something going on with their psoas and that's why they have shoulder pain, but they ask for shoulder pain, start with the shoulders, not the psoas. Start with the shoulders first so they know that you heard them, and then go to the psoas. That's my advice. I feel it works best for the client to know that you created a trusting bond with them, that they know that they've been heard, you address that area first, and then you can go to other areas that you see that are linked to that area. It makes them feel empowered because they spoke up for themselves, you heard them, and you applied that, and therefore they trust you and they're more likely to come back. And of course, make sure that you communicate with them before the session, during the session. Make sure that they know that you are there for them and that you want to be able to cater to their needs in a professional, respectful way for both of you, of course. And of course, therapists are occasionally going to zone out during a session or have lack of concentration, and this is normal. But remember that you want to keep coming back to the client. Anytime you drift off, make sure you come back to your client and that you concentrate. There's so many benefits to being completely present. Never give inappropriate advice. Make sure you stay in your scope of practice. We do not want our clients to go home and do things that we may have told them to do and then them get hurt. We want to help them, and the best way we can help them is to only stay in our line of work, our credentials, and to share only things that are appropriate. Also remember that we don't want people to have high expectations that we're going to fix them or give them the best session, because they could be let down. So make sure that you stay in your balanced ego and stay in neutrality. Communicate with them that this is a collaboration, that you're both working together towards their healing. Empower them, and then that way they won't see you as a savior, and then they'll have a little bit more realistic expectations from you and from their session. Also, just remember, if you see your client in public or you see them out anywhere, do not approach them. Respect their boundaries. Always respect their boundaries in the office, outside of the office. You don't know all their whole history, their whole story. Don't pretend that you do. Just remember that you are their professional healthcare practitioner and that they come to see you, and that that's where the story is in the office. And if they want to engage outside of the office, that's okay, but make sure to keep it professional. And lastly, remember about self-care and how very important that is. The more that we're able to take care of ourselves, the more we're able to meet our client where they're at. So that concludes part 1 of meeting the client where they're at, and I will see you in part 2.